Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for links to some great online retailers. There's also individual links for knives that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting discussion topic to share with you guys, and that's, should you buy a knife with a super steel? Now, you know, a lot of my viewers, you know what the term is, you know what these steels generally consist of, right? But again, there's a lot of new people watching my channel who have questions about this stuff, and it's confusing. The knife world is confusing, and it's changing and growing really fast, so that's why I do these types of videos. I want to help clarify, you know, what the term means, at least in a general sense, and whether or not, you know, it's something that is beneficial for you. First and foremost, there is a huge difference between, you know, knife steels that you can choose from. Not all steel is created equal. It is very, very different, and it is meant for different types of tasks and different types of, you know, people using their knives for different things, different geometries, right? I've done lots of videos on steel, right? Best TDC steel of all time, best this, best that, you know, my favorite, but, right? You can check those out. I've got a lot of videos in top 10 and controversy and discussion on my playlist. Understand this. I know there's always somebody ready to type this up. The thing that's going to matter more than anything is the geometry of the blade. That's here. Like if you're talking about performance of your blade, right? We're cutting with our knives, right? When we talk about performance, it's going to have a lot more to do with number one, blade geometry, and number two, heat treat, right? The range of appropriate or optimized heat treat is different for every steel. Some steels have, you know, relatively similar, you know, optimum ranges, Rockwell hardness, right? But they change. I mean, each steel is different. You know, think of the composition of the steel as a multi-directional teeter-totter. You add something in, and the teeter-totter changes, right? It might benefit the edge retention, right, and the toughness, but it might take away from ease of sharpening and maybe corrosion resistance, right? I mean, it just depends on the makeup, right? There is no such thing as the perfect knife steel. No knife steel can do everything. It can't be maxed out everywhere. Now, there are definitely steels where the composition just doesn't yield anything great. There are steels that are just better in general than some basic, like if we're talking about 420J is junk, or anything that says surgical steel on it, or if it just doesn't say what the steel is, it's garbage, right? It's soft, it's buttery. Yeah, usually it's gonna be stainless, it's gonna resist corrosion, and it's gonna be super easy to sharpen. Great. I'd rather trade some of that out for some stuff that makes my knife usage a little bit easier, right? So anyways, follow me on Instagram if you are not following me already. I would very much appreciate it. I do have Patreon. Thanks so much to my generous patrons for supporting me right now. If you'd like to get your hands on some of these cool stickers and some other benefits, there is, of course, a link down in the description. Your support would mean the world to me. So I do not have every knife steel ever out on the table, but it's also funny. We're in this weird transitional point where there are new arising, you know, super steels that are coming out. These new weird, a lot of them are coming out through Spyderco. Spyderco's, you know, generally they do a great job with heat treatment. They do a lot of sprints with some weird stuff, and it's really tempting, right, to see you know, a knife in steel that you've never heard of, and you're immediately intrigued by it because it's new and it's different, right? And then somebody like Spyderco, they do like sprint runs and special variants, right? And there's only so many of them, so you got to jump on it really quick, right? And, you know, they do a great job with heat treats. They generally nail their heat treats, right? So the steel performs as it is intended, but whether or not the end user needs it is one thing or another. A lot of times, a lot of this stuff attracts the enthusiast, attracts the collector, which is why there's so much fuss about this stuff on YouTube and Instagram, because people like me are like, oh, neat, it's new and different, and it's what, you know, it's a new number and letters crammed together on the blade. So we want it, right? Do I need that steel? I can tell you right now that me, as far as how I use my knives, right? I might get my pocket knife out, you know, 5 to 10 times a week to make simple cuts, cardboard, rope, rubber, little things like that. Use it a little bit harder on the weekends if I'm working outside, but it's nothing crazy. Me personally, I cannot justify a crazy high-end ultra super steel. You know, I can speak to some of their benefits having used them, but, you know, is it going to make that much of a difference for me? No. A lot of these steels are, you know, the idea behind it. But first off, a lot of steel composition, let's go ahead and get these out while I'm talking. A lot of the composition of steel, its initial application was not meant for a folding knife. right? It had something else. A lot of times it's meant for machines that process food, or sometimes that process other materials. Sometimes it's machines that process metal, right? And so somebody at some point gets the bright idea, we should make that into a pocket knife, sell it as a like a premium cutting tool. And yeah, in a lot of cases, it definitely works. And sometimes it's overkill, right? There are infinite variables. I can't discuss this. I'm going to try to keep this under 15 minutes. We'll see. I'm going to try to discuss this, but there's so many variables, infinite variables. Not one person, myself included. We can't tell you exactly whether or not it's right for you. I mean, like truthfully, you know, I'll tell you right now, if you just like the idea of something new and different, then buy it. Buy what makes you happy. You know, if you've saved up the money and you want to get something cool and interesting, all this stuff will cut, and it'll cut efficiently, and it's going to do really well, especially if it's made by somebody who's doing the heat treat correctly and it's got a decent geometry. Then yeah, and go ahead. If it makes you happy, then buy it. You know, you guys know there's links down in the description. You can pick stuff up and you can go look and just buy what, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be perfectly optimized for what you're using it for. Anybody who tells you that, you don't have to listen to them. You know, now if you are doing something specific and you really are looking for, you know, the best blade geometry and knife steel for what you're doing, then yeah, then a lot of extra research is totally justified. So I've got some steels up top that are associated with the budget world right now. Not necessarily anything new. 9CR18 MOV on the Civivi Prax. This is fairly common, and by budget world, I mean around the $50 mark or a little bit less. CJRB Crag, this is the new one with the recoil lock, and it's coming in D2. Definitely a steel that people are familiar with. That standard ingot form D2, not CPM or powder form D2, which is a different monster. And one of my personal favorites, this is actually 12C27N, which is one of the very few knife steels out there that was actually made for folding knives. That's good stuff. I'll talk about why here in a sec. We've got some of the steels that I have become familiar with in what I used to consider to be, and some of them still are, the ultra high end of the steel world, right? Over the last, you know, 7 or 8 years, these are the steels that I have become familiar with. And 154CM, not a new steel. It used to be considered much higher end than it is now. Now we're seeing 154CM, which is honestly one of my favorite steels, if not my very favorite user steel of all time. We're seeing this steel, you know, pop up in knives that cost less than $100, right? S30V, another steel that's actually made, or originally was made for folding knives on the Spyderco Shaman here. By the way, this is the ProTech titanium Strider SNG, sorry, automatic through ProTech. S30V is another steel that was actually made for folding knives on the Spyderco Shaman here. Very well rounded. Some people consider it to be a super steel and some people don't, but it's definitely losing its shine as of late. S35VN in this special Civivi Elementum. And again, one of my favorite steels of all time. Used to be considered absolutely a super steel, right? But we're seeing this knife we're seeing this steel in a knife that costs less than $100 now. And, you know, again, this is all just definition. It's all just how people define it. And it's usually based on what price range we find it in, right? A super steel or a premium steel, right, is exclusive to the upper tiers of the knife world. So as soon as we start seeing S35VN, right, which is a great composition, it's a great user steel, right? And I think it's deserving of the title of super steel. As soon as we start seeing it pop up in knives like this, right, maybe the demand for it's less, maybe it starts costing less. So companies like Civivi, you know, put it on the Elementum here, and they can make it for less money. Then people's perception of it is, oh, it's not as premium, it's not as good as some of these newer steels that are coming out, right? So it's not a super steel anymore. The composition is what it is, right? It's not like, you know, in some ways steels are getting better or their processes are getting better, but like the process still yields really, really good performance. It's weird because we've come up from a time period where 440C used to be considered the very best steel available. And now it's considered a budget steel, even though many people will tell you that its performance is actually really good. It's very well rounded, you know, but there's this huge emphasis on edge retention. Edge retention is king. Whatever has the best edge retention is more premium than the last thing. Edge retention is certainly important, but it's not the end all be all. There's so many other things you have to consider, but that's, I think, what we've been, I'm not going to say led to believe. I'm saying that is an easy conclusion to come to, you know, collectively throughout the knife community, whether you're new or you're a veteran. You know, it's easy to kind of like automatically associate certain elements of steels with premium or super steels, right? CPM M4. Yeah, this is a winner, right? It used to really shine in the knife community. Excellent edge retention, incredible toughness, which is the blade's ability to resist, fracturing from impact or chipping, during cutting. It's going to roll before it chips, right? The downside is it's not stainless, which is part of that multi-directional teeter-totter thing that I talk about, right? A lot of times to get some of these amazing benefits and edge performance, you have to sacrifice something. And in steels like M4, what's sacrificed is corrosion resistance, which is why you can see that it's coated here. M390, it's been the king forever. We've talked about M390. In fact, I've got a video called What's So Great About M390? M390 it's just been the king of the premium steels for so long. And it's part of that emphasis on edge retention, right? This says the big deal with M390 is it's got great edge retention and is very, very stainless with something like 20% chromium. Not tough steel, though. Not fun to sharpen, but, it just has become that steel that people feel good about when they spend, over $100, $200, $300, $400, $500, $600. Honestly, M390 on a semi-custom blade that cost $800, people are like, okay, people buy a $1,000 shear groff and it's got M390. Hey, it's M390. I'm good with that, right? It's a composition. It's a good composition, but there are elements of it that aren't going to work out, right? If somebody is like if you live in an area like me, I don't have to deal with corrosion resistance a lot. I have to deal with corrosion a lot, right? My blades don't corrode. It's not the environment where that happens. So the excess corrosion resistance in M390 is as good as I feel about having it on the knife that I've got it on, which is this XM18 3.5 inch. And by the way, the M4 is the Super Freak through Benchmade. I don't need the excess corrosion resistance. I found out that I can actually gain a benefit from steels like M4, where they don't have as much corrosion resistance, but they've got a lot of extra toughness. I found that for me, it actually, those steels are actually more preferable in terms of use because I don't need all this excess corrosion resistance. This is my Maxima Para 3. We'll get to it. This ain't stainless at all. It's got a little bit of a patina forming, but I've had that thing for a year and I use it. It's not corroding and not at a pace where it's going to bother me, but I get to enjoy the other elements there. So yeah. So I'm convinced that M390 is going to see its end day. So it's not like it's going to disappear. It's not like we're going to erase it or cancel it, right? Cancel M390. It's just not going to be the king for much longer. It still seems to be the preferred king, right? But it's not going to be the king much longer. These are the steels that I've become very familiar with as I have, gone through my journey in the knife world, right? And some steels still remain to be, fairly way up high, and some other steels have kind of lost their shine. But these are just compositions that yield better or worse benefits for different people in different geographic locations and different, theories of use or actual use, right? In different blade geometries, right? Again, infinite variables. For new people, there are so many variables, so don't let anybody tell you that anything is absolute. This is a guideline. Newer stuff. This is the stuff that everybody's all, wow, the new thing. So we got CPM Spy 27, which is something that I guess Spyderco worked out with Crucible to make this really interesting steel. So Knife Steel Nerds is a great place to go to read up on this stuff. I actually should go there and read more because they go through this in a way that helps it make sense with new. I use an application on my phone called Z Knives, or I think it's Knife Steel Composition, but it pulls information from Z Knives, and I can get a general understanding of composition, carbon content, chromium content, vanadium content, all that, molybdenum, however you say that. And I'm not a professional, but that's how I get a rough idea of a steel before I look into, more information. And that source for more information is from, why did I do this? I don't know, I quoted. More information I get from Knife Steel Nerds because they cover these different steels, including all the new crazy super steels in amazing detail, right? And so I checked out Spy 27, and I've used this a little bit, and I'm pretty impressed with the minimal use that I put it through. I think if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong, guys, there's so many numbers and things flying around in my head, so many different models and compositions and crap. It's so hard to keep track of all this. Spy 27 seems to be fairly similar to S35EN, but just it's been tweaked a little bit. Oftentimes the tweaking is meant to maintain, the certain elements of a composition that a wide variety of people find beneficial, right? But if they can make it easier to machine, that's good for, you know, in comparison with these other compositions that other people like, right? S35VN, for anybody who doesn't know, it was developed as basically an evolution of S30V. The idea was to make it easier to machine, but keep a lot of the same qualities, and they largely managed to do that, right? A lot of people like it, right? So what can we tweak? What can we change to keep a lot of this stuff, right? Can we make it easier to machine? Can we add a little bit of corrosion resistance or make it more beneficial for a wider audience of people? And essentially that's what's happening with a lot of these newer steels, or at least that's what seems like is happening. Again, a lot of these steels, their general, you know, the original application was not folding knives. It's just like, that would probably, you know, sell well on a folding knife or perform well enough that people are going to say nice things about it, and then it's going to work out, right? So I don't know what the exact idea with SPY 27 was. I mean, it's obviously something that Spyderco wants to make exclusive, or has made exclusive through themselves, and can put it on Spyderco sprints and take certain models that are, you know, have done really well in the past, but are, you know, just need a, they don't necessarily need for it to be redesigned. They just need a fresh coat of paint, and that SPY 27 can act as that fresh coat of paint and get people to make a purchase. Does that make it something that you shouldn't check out? No, not necessarily. I mean, the minor tweakings to, like, if something, I mean, take a steel that I've already liked. Like, take, for example, S35VN, right? I mean, you guys know about the new S45VN, right? I can't remember exactly the changes there, but can we take S35VN and maybe keep it as just as stainless? Can we make it a little bit easier to machine, maybe, or, you know, maybe make it a trivial difference in how hard it is to machine, but increase the edge retention just a little bit and make it just as stainless? Would people enjoy that? Yeah, sure, totally. It's just as easy to sharpen, but it holds an edge maybe a little bit longer, and it's just as stainless. I'm making stuff up here, but I'm just giving you an example of a slight tweak that would benefit a lot of people, or at least sounds good to me, right? Would I spend another $150 to $200 to get, you know, another knife in the same? Well, because this community is driven largely by enthusiasts and collectors, right? There's definitely a lot of us use our knives, but, you know, the buyer part of this, the people who buy multiple knives are interested in the idea of something being marginally better, right? Just for the theory of use, right? You take any line of performance car, right? I remember when the Viper, the V10 Viper, is 500 horsepower and 0 to 60 and whatever, right? It was fast. The ones in the 90s, they were fast. The ones in the early 2000s, they were faster. Do they need to be faster? No. Will people pay more money if they go faster? Sure. Most of them are just putting them in their garage, right? Just whatever. If they bought it, they can do what they want with it, right? But, you know, the idea of it being more tuned, more aerodynamic, faster, right? Bigger, stronger, faster, more now, right? That's the world we live in. So, like it or not, view it as a gimmick or not. I had this conversation with somebody else in the comments section. We're actually dependent on it. If you like the knife world expanding and there's constantly new designs coming out, we are dependent on new people coming in to the knife world. I have gone way over my 15-minute mark. Whatever. I'm going to say this. We are fully dependent on more people coming in, more people being interested, more people spending money, whether it is with U.S. manufacturers, Chinese manufacturers, wherever it is that they're being manufactured. We're dependent on that. So those companies, you know, collectively or, you know, single or isolated, whatever, can make more things and do more things and expand and innovate and do it well, right? That's what draws the attention. So whether you agree with, you know, geographic location and manufacturing, or the idea behind changing a steel and making a new super steel, even if it's only marginally different than the last one, right? Whether you agree with the idea that it's a good thing or a bad thing, we are actually dependent on this new stuff coming out, or in some situations, just a fresh coat of paint on some older designs to keep that thing going, right? So, should you spend more money on a super steel? It depends. If you just want it, if you think if it's going to make you feel good, then sure. If you've budgeted correctly, right, and you're not spending your rent check on it, oh, yeah, sure, go ahead. But are you going to know, like, is somebody like me going to notice a difference between S30V, S35VN, SPY 27, S45VN, LMAX? Those are all compositions that are somewhat similar. Again, I'm sure people will correct me. No. If my job was to break down cardboard every single day, right, I would want a steel that holds an edge for a pretty long time, one that is tough, that is not going to chip, and one that does not result in a nightmarish sharpening experience. I want efficiency for that specific thing, right? If I'm not cutting wet cardboard, then I don't care too much about corrosion resistance, and I also live in Kansas, right? So the composition and the geometry, and of course the heat treat, it would all matter very much in that specific situation. In terms of general EDC, if primarily what you're doing is opening packages here and there, getting your knife out between 1 and 20 times per week to do little teeny tiny things, then it's largely what I've said about, you know, these types of just steel in general over time, is that no, it really doesn't matter. Pick the thing that looks nice to you, that's fun for you, that makes you feel good, right? We don't really talk about Rex 45. What is Rex 45? I actually beat this thing into the ground the other day just to see. I guess it's most similar to M4, but again, it's just changes made to, I don't know if they used M4's composition as a platform, right? Because people love M4. That's competition steel, by the way. You ever seen those competition gauntlet style cutting things where some guy makes a chopper and he's running, he gets a rope and he runs with a tennis ball, right? And then he kicks the beach ball into the thing and it bounces back and he does a cartwheel and it does ninja chops a watermelon. And not really, that's not really part of it, but you know, it's like a obstacle course and everything's a different cutting task. M4 does really well at that because it's tough and it's sharp. Who cares about corrosion resistance, right? It's not like, can you get to the end without the blade corroding, right? I mean, that's not really part of it. So and that kind of helped sell M4. And for some people, it's great, right? And for other people, it's like they'll never need that. And you know, it's like if you live on or near the ocean, then don't buy M4. Don't buy anything that's not stainless, because literally within a day it will have corrosion on it, right? And that will definitely affect it over time. Rex 45, much harder. I think M4 is optimized around 64, 62, 64, something like that. Rex 45, I think the idea is much harder, 66 to 68. Now, harder doesn't always mean better, right? Harder, it just depends on the composition, right? And its optimum performance of the original idea of its performance, whether or not it's optimized at a certain hardness. If you hardened Rex 45 to 60, it wouldn't perform the way that it was intended to perform. You wouldn't get those benefits based on the composition. Again, not a professional, not a metallurgist. It's just the result of a lot of reading and listening and observing and watching other YouTube videos, right? And some cutting, right? Because you have to understand it, at least at base, you have to do a little bit of cutting with it. This is a little harder. Super tough. Still manages to keep a lot of toughness despite it being much, much, much harder. And definitely edge retention. It has a lot of edge retention. I mean, it's insane. Does it have more edge retention than M4? I think the idea with optimized heat treat, I think that it does. But I mean, you know, I can't really tell the difference between these two. They're both great. They're both not stainless. They're both pretty tough. And I'd imagine they're both really crappy to sharpen. But man, they will eat through some material and not break down readily. Maximate. So there are steels that have, you know, better edge retention. Like, if we're talking about like the emphasis on edge retention, because that's always going to be a thing. People are like, more edge retention, right? It's like with flashlights, lumens, more lumens, right? Make it. I want to be able to blast a hole in the side of a tank with my flashlight, right? You know, like this thing. This is the cheapy. Defiant knife. It's not hardly anything. It's probably like 150. And my EGTAC, which is very bright, I think this is about 500 or so lumens. Sorry about that. But it's got a maximum output of like, I think strobe is like 800. I don't know. I don't need that much, you know, but it's neat because it's a bigger number. The implication is that it is able to do more or see more, help you see more in this quiet. You know, if I was like lost in the jungle and I was trying to signal a helicopter right after I had just saved a village from destruction, and I was like trying to get away from the organization that was after me. Whatever fantasy scenario, you know. Anyways, Maximate, insane edge retention. I bought this because I was like, oh, cool, Maximate. That sounds so cool. Maximate, right? Neat. What's the deal with Maximate? Holy crap. It has like the best edge retention that's available right now. Now, there are other steels in the past, like long from the past, S125V and CPM Rex 121, which has one of the highest possible Rockwells to make the, you know, composition work correctly. But the end result is that it technically has the best potential edge retention of any composition that's out there. great. It's almost impossible to machine, and it is overwhelmingly prone to chipping, which is why nobody works with it, right? Is it neat? Sure. But that's so specific, right? If your job is like, you know, like shaving toilet paper forever, there you go. The thinnest possible blade in Rex 121, and you can shave toilet paper for 4,000 years before you have to sharpen it, right? I'm joking around. I mean, obviously there's some benefit to it, or it wouldn't exist. S125V, both of those steels are stainless, right? Excellent edge retention. S125V slightly less edge retention than S125V. Maximate doesn't have quite the potential edge retention of those steels, but it is definitely like the best in terms of what you're going to find out there right now. And I think Spyderco's the only ones that are using it. The difference is that it's not stainless, but the composition yields much better toughness. And I have found that to absolutely be the case. I have not doled this yet. In fact, I don't know if I've actually even put, come on, focus. I don't know if I've actually even put, yeah. I just EDC this. I'm not going out and beating the crap out of it. You can see we got a couple of marks here and there's some adhesive on the end. But I've had it for a year and it is still razor sharp, and I carry and use this thing. I mean, like I said, it gets pulled out of my pocket between 5 and 20 times a week or so to do little things, and it's totally fine. I haven't found the point where I need to sharpen it yet. That's great. It's not really corroding. That's great, right? Little patinas forming on it. It's nice and tough. But when the day comes for me to sharpen it, I'd imagine it's not going to be the best experience ever. But it seems like I only have to sharpen it like once every year and a half. So, yeah. Should you buy a super steel, right? A super steel. Steels are just compositions, right? Some knives cost $35. Some knives cost $400, $500, $600, right? You can enjoy a knife for any reason you want to, right? If you just feel good about buying what you consider to be premium materials. I really like to do this a lot in this video. Okay, you know, buy the style you want. Buy the blade that looks good, right? Buy the finish you want. Buy the steel you want. If you're just going to use it for general EDC, right? And you're like, oh, am I going to get made fun of because the knife community is going to be like, you don't need that. It's way out of your league, or you didn't choose the right steel or blade geometry for this task. Don't listen to people like that. Buy what you want. If you're just going to use it for EDC, buy what you want, right? If you're comfortable spending 50 to 100 bucks, spend that much. If you want to spend a lot more money and get something way better, then sure, right? Do these styles of knives, their locking mechanisms, their materials, their geometries, their steel, right? All that stuff. Does it conclude in like a very specific circumstance where that particular knife in its, you know, all the culminating elements, is it going to do better than everything else? Maybe in some really very specific circumstance, but I don't know. Does that matter? It might matter to some people. It might not matter to some people. You know, just choose what's right for you. Should you buy a super steel? I didn't really answer the question. Buy it if you want to. Oh my God. What did I say? I said we're going to keep this under 15 minutes. 28 minutes. That's going to be pretty much it for today's video, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that metal complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.